Tonight, the journalist, finance writer and former Brexit Party MEP, Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Hi, Annunziata.
Hi, Mark.
Great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for giving up a chunk of your evening. Can I just pick up on that text poll? Do you think it was a mistake defenestrating Boris Johnson?
I think defenestrating is the word. And yes, I think it was a complete mistake that he was the Prime Minister who had the mandate to lead our country. The first 2 years of his administration were quite possibly the most impossible any Prime Minister has faced as they came onto the scene. No one knew what to expect, and things changed in a matter of days. To disregard the strength of public vote that he had won in 2019, I think was a grave error.
Now, I'm told that you became a Conservative at the age of 5. I think when you were 8, you were too young to join the Young Conservatives, so you just joined the Conservative Party proper. Why were you so sure that this was the right philosophy for you?
I was always a great believer in the freedom of the individual and helping those who really need it, but not a nanny knows best state. I had the most wonderful nanny ever. My brother stole her and she now is known as his nanny, but she looked after me when I was a child, and she was a wonderful presence in our lives. But I didn't feel that the government should be telling us what to do or how to do it.
But if that's what you thought when you were 5, that might suggest you were brainwashed.
I'm from a large family who have very rigorous debates, and I was allowed to choose which side I wanted to end up on. No one could brainwash any of us.
Annunziata, why did you back Brexit?
For very similar reasons, that I felt it had been done under false pretenses in the first place, that the original vote had not told us we were going to end up in a full political union. It had been purely for some financial benefits along the trade lines, that the British public had never had a say in it, that it was not democratic, and it was deeply interfering in our way of life and how we had to obey rules in this country.
How do you feel that Brexit is playing out? Do you have any Brexit buyer's regret? Because you've got fantastic pedigree as a finance writer and a journalist on economic matters. And of course, some talent for figures is within the family. It's not looking great at the moment, is it? So are we going to wait for these Brexit benefits?
Well, nowhere in the world is the economy looking great at the moment. I wish it were, but we are between the payback for big spending on COVID, the long-term reliance on cheap loans and cheap money, and of course the awful situation in Ukraine and the invasion by Russia, let alone China not fully reopening to trade. The world economy is not in a great place. That is not Brexit's fault. In fact, the UK, because we haven't been paying in to the European Union, is well over 100 billion better off. That those who never wanted us to leave want us to now think that every problem our country faces is the fault of Brexit. Well, it's simply not true.
Indeed so. Do you think that Rishi Sunak is the right man to make the best of Brexit? He was a Brexit supporter and showed some political courage in backing Brexit, given the fact that at the time his boss was arch Remainer David Cameron. But there are many on the Tory backbenches who don't really feel his heart's in it.
I think there's many in the country who feel that, and I hope he proves them wrong. That I don't think the Tory backbenchers have necessarily shown the wisest judgments to this point. But all I can hope is that Rishi proves that he is the man to take us through the rest of Brexit. There is still much, much to do, not only sorting out Northern Ireland, but getting rid of all the ridiculous laws that came in under the auspices of European law. That has to be changed. And if and when it is, we will have much greater opportunities to run ourselves and be a more prosperous nation.
Another Rees-Mogg told me on this programme, I can't remember which one, not nearly as clever as you, said that that Rishi Sunak had been a rubbish chancellor, a poor chancellor. Do you rate Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister?
I don't believe in big government. So the idea that I would suddenly support Rishi Sunak telling us to all eat out and he'd pay for it on the government tax bill, which we have to remember is every single taxpayer's pennies going into that and costing us out of our own daily spending. No, I don't think he made the best decisions as Chancellor. I think there was also a huge amount of fraud, which has not been recovered under the various COVID help schemes. It was right to put out support to certain sectors and people in particular circumstances. But the carte blanche approach that the Treasury took, I think, was an erroneous one.
Speaking of your principles, your belief in individual personal freedom, personal responsibility as well, would you take the view that lockdowns, mask mandates, vaccine mandates were an historic mistake?
The proof will be in the pudding, and figures are still coming out. But from what I've seen so far, the Swedish, for example, did far better than any of the countries that tried to lock up its citizens as hard as possible. And if we just look to China now, the absolute disaster that is sweeping through, because they lock down people so hard that there is no immunity in the wider community. And now it is rife and killing people. I think I'm not a scientist, I'm not going to claim to be, but I think morally it's a very questionable thing to ask people to live in isolation.
And also you are an economist, and there was no cost-benefit analysis of lockdowns, was there? And unfortunately, it seems the sage advisors didn't listen to the University of Bristol, for example, who early in the pandemic predicted that 500,000 people would die because of economic damage. And this is something people don't realise, the link between the health of the economy and human health and longevity.
It is incredibly linked, and also to mental health. I haven't yet seen the figures on what were undoubtedly going to be higher suicide rates, domestic abuse rates. Certainly it was talked about to some extent at the time, and I haven't seen the final outcomes. But I think the damage that it did to individuals' lives, economically, socially and mentally, was really very traumatic.
Now, I think you could make a rich contribution to the House of Commons and public life. You've had a couple of goes at becoming an MP. Would you like to try again? What are your ambitions going forward, Annunziata?
Well, I did say once before that I had absolutely no ambitions to return to politics. And unfortunately, it got to such a terrible state of affairs under Theresa May, completely ignoring the British people's democratic will, that I felt I had to. But I'm so happy to not be in Parliament at the moment. I think it is a viper's nest, and B, a horrible world, particularly for women, with social media and physical attacks going on. Our MPs actually face quite an unpleasant workplace, and I'm glad I'm not with them.
Annunziata Rees-Mogg, do join us in the studio soon.
I would love to. Thank you so much, Mark.